Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz trumpeter Jason Palmer on his latest project, the 2020 CD, The Concert, 12 Musings for Isabella, that came out on March 18th, 2020. It is the 30th anniversary of the 1990 art theft at Boston's Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. He opened up about this unique project and the new COVID-19 quarantine world where we live without the live jazz, but get great releases like this one. Please dig.
How you holding up?
Oh, pretty good. Doing all right. Yeah. Out in Spokane, Washington. Yeah, that's where I am now. So
I gotcha. Okay. And I guess that's kind of been Seattle was the first real epicenter of things that started. So is anything calmed down up there?
Yeah, Spokane's about 5 hours east of Seattle, so it's pretty far out the way. So it's not too bad where we are.
Good deal. Good deal. Well, Jason, thank you for taking a minute to talk with me here at Neon Jazz. It's great to catch up with you about this specific 12 Musings for Isabella project. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me.
My pleasure, man. So the whole backdrop to this project is awesome. So I'll let you, in your words, it's the 30th anniversary of the 1990 art theft at Boston's Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. And the story is, I think I remember this. I was in high school at the time, but it's a fascinating story. I love these projects where it specifically deals with one moment in time and it gets elongated into an artistic rendition. So just talk to me a little bit about this project.
Yeah, it's kind of serendipitous or a big coincidence that it happened to be 30 years this year. I didn't realize it until actually the project was recorded already. And it initially, there were several steps, I guess, in my life that led me up to this project. Back in the late 90s, when I was a student at NEC, New England Conservatory in Boston, I would go to the Gardner Museum. I went a few times to hear concerts there. And one particular time I went there and I noticed in one of the rooms there was a few empty frames. And I didn't quite understand why that was until I, read about the heist and everything. And so I thought, wow, that's a really, really strong gesture to, put empty frames there with the hopes of, the paintings being recovered and put back in those frames. And so I really liked that idea. And so fast forward about, 12 years after that, I was playing a concert with the saxophone player Grace Kelly at a museum in New York City, and she was commissioned for this concert to write a piece that was inspired by one of the pieces that the directors at the museum chose. And so that was my first exposure to playing music that's inspired by visual art, and so I guess that was like the second step that led me to this project. And then the third step was checking out a podcast called Last Scene that was sponsored by WBUR, a local radio station. And it was like a 10-part series that talked about the heist and all the ensuing investigations that have happened ever since. And when I heard that, it made me really want to go back and reinvestigate these pieces of art and find out what they look like. I didn't know what they looked like at the time, so I went online and found images of them, and I just started wondering what that would sound like, looking at a painting and looking at the techniques that these artists used, and how, and just trying to figure out how I could transpose their techniques into my compositional techniques. And so that's how the tunes were born that way, just figuring out, that kind of thing inside of my improvisatory mind.
So have they come any closer to finding any of these pieces than they ever had before, or is it just still like a D.B. Cooper, a total mystery?
I think at this point it's pretty much a total mystery. I did an interview at the museum a couple of weeks ago, and I met one of the directors there who has been, it's been his lifelong, one of his lifelong missions is to keep track of everything and to follow up on all the clues that he's gotten. there's nothing that's surfaced yet. And I asked him if he had any feeling. He thought that they're probably within a 60 to 100 mile radius of the museum. He said, usually recovered art that's stolen from museums is usually found pretty close to where the museum is. And so that idea, I mean, that could be. I'm hoping that they aren't gone. I spent a fair bit of time researching the history of art heists and looking at interviews and listening to interviews of famous art thieves. And what I found out is that there are some pieces of art that are so valuable they're really hard to sell on the black market, and so they end up going into various regimes to be traded for arms or hostages. And there was one art historian who thought that maybe the pieces of art are in Ireland and they're in the hands of the IRA. That was his best guess. And then there was another art heist thief that said he came across some works that he had stolen that were so difficult to sell that he ended up burning them. So that's like one of my deepest fears, is that, these paintings are, in the ethers. They've been burned up, and, because no one wants to be caught with those. But at this point, when I was talking to Anthony, the security, the guy that works at the museum, the director, he was telling me that the statute of limitations has passed, so whoever has those pieces wouldn't be prosecuted. So there's that deal too. So.
Wow, that's wild. So, speaking of, art missing, we're in a modern era right now of missing jazz, missing museums, missing art, and these things that sustain us so much during this time of during this coronavirus time. And my question to you is this. It's kind of akin to maybe this fella, if he actually did get this artwork back, how joyed he would be and what his reaction would be. And my question to you is this. What do you hope the audience gets from this absence of live jazz? What do you hope they feel, and any kind of revelations or rejuvenations that people might feel when we actually do get to re-enter society and let art and museums and jazz flow over our brains again in a live setting?
Yeah, well, it's my hope that people appreciate the art form and support it even more than they did beforehand, and just realize the importance of the power of this music and other types of music and art and cultural events, how they bring us together, not only physically, but also just in terms of energy. I think one of the most important things that we get from this music in particular is the power and the energy of improvisation and what that does in terms of sound, because I really think sound can be a healing force for sure. So, that's probably what I really hope, is that the appreciation increases and the support is sustained and increased as well.
So do you think it would be kind of a cool thing to listen to this album while you go through this existing museum with the pieces they have in there and kind of take in the aura of it?
Oh, yeah, that would be really cool. There's actually an app that someone created. It's like a virtual app. I don't know if you have to be in the museum to access it, but I haven't tried it yet. But what it does is you can scan over a particular empty frame and see what that painting looked like within that frame.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's a really, really cool thing. And to sync that up with some music, not necessarily my new record, but anything, I think that would be really, really cool.
So I guess my final question is this. How's the jazz community doing? I know everything's kind of, I know in Kansas City, everything's kind of dried up, and it's a tough time, but, in reality, is there going to be a good rebound? What's your estimation of things?
I'm hopeful that there will be a rebound that can really recoup a lot of the losses. I know a lot of my friends and colleagues are really, really hurting, not just financially, but also just the need to play with people. And you know, a lot of folks are getting together in homes and doing sessions in places and live streaming them. So there is a community of people that are coming together that way. But it's no substitute for playing for people, you know, in a live setting. So I think it may take some time, and you know, I'm optimistic that it won't be as long as you know, a lot of the experts are predicting. So let's hope this thing, you know, is resolved and we can get back to health and yeah. So I'm hopeful. I remain hopeful for sure.
Me too, for sure. Jason, thank you for taking some time out today to talk about the album and what's going on in our world and music. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Joe. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Boston, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Jason for his time, music, and honesty. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit Neon Jazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.